All right, folks, welcome everybody once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama. We have Greg Flamong also producing the show. Uh, Lots to get talking about today. Before I get going, I wanted to mention once again, great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. Go to the front page of irishsportsdaily.com, click on the premium section, sign up. Lots going on with Notre Dame recruiting. They had a huge weekend this weekend. We got some early returns on that. We'll discuss all that and where things are headed as far as where some of these players are at in their decision process and visits, all that kind of stuff. So we'll kind of give a rundown on that and talk about that. But once again, if you want to know everything that's going on with these guys, you can go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily, click on the premium section, sign up today. There's a lot that's going on. Also, if you don't follow our YouTube channel, you can also watch the show live on YouTube. You can search for Irish Sports Daily or Irish Sports Daily on YouTube and find our channel there. Make sure you click and subscribe and like the channel. That certainly helps us a lot, and that'll also let you know when we have more content on and if we're actually live when you show up. So great thing to do, and we greatly appreciate everybody subscribing to our YouTube channel. Before we get going, we wanted to mention once again our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade. Has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. All right, guys. So, Yama, big weekend. I mean, just a really, really big weekend for Notre Dame. There has been a lot of talk about what has happened. There's been a lot of updates, people's thoughts on the weekend and that type of thing. And I'm just going to give you my thoughts with 25 years of experience in doing this. Okay. And again, I don't want it to be like a situation where, I'm being the negative one. And that's not my intent, because I do think that based off of everything we hear, that it was a very good weekend and Notre Dame put themselves in a great position for a lot of these guys. And it's very important because a lot of these guys are going to be making a decision very shortly, which is very important. Some of them were Notre Dame was their last official visit, which is also important. So I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but I just want to just temper things a little bit and tell people, look, I've done this for a long time. I've seen this show many times, and after official visits, everybody's high on everything. They're very, very excited. The players are excited when they're there. The parents are excited when they're there, and you get a euphoria and you get excited about things, and you think, okay, this is the place I want to be. And I think that happens to a lot of people. If you look at, say, Joey O'Brien, if you follow his recruiting, it seemed like after the Penn State visit, everybody thought he was going to Penn State. Then he went to Clemson and everybody felt like he was going to Clemson. And it's just one of these things where you get around these people, and every school has a good situation. Especially for somebody like Joey O'Brien, every school is going to have a winning tradition. Every school is going to be in a good position to challenge for a national championship. Every school is going to offer a lot of NIL. Every school's got good coaching. Every school's got literally everything you're going to want. And so it's easy to get kind of wrapped up into, well, this is a great situation. And then once you get home, everybody else gets to get on the phone and remind you of why you like their school as well. And then that's when the confusion starts. And that's when the real decisions start. And so I like to tell people, don't get too high on these reports, and also don't get too low if something's negative, because sometimes you have to sift through all the stuff that's out there and do your pluses, do your minuses, have more conversations, and then it's time to make a decision. And so for a lot of these guys, the decision is going to be coming soon. Some it'll be a little bit later. And there's a lot of stuff that can happen between now and when they actually make a decision. And so for a long time, I've tried to tell people, um, look, I don't care about predictions. I don't care about stuff like this because none of it matters. When it really matters is decision time. And I think a good example of that, Jamie, is Alistair Vallejo. I think a lot of people felt like, oh man, Notre Dame's going to get him. He came in for an unofficial visit. Everything, a lot of people were talking very positive about it, blah, blah, blah. And then to come out and find out later that, Michigan was very much a factor the entire time. Some feel that Michigan may have even been leading the entire time. Others may argue that. But there are a lot of things that are said that I think a lot of people get excited about, but they don't know the whole picture. And I just want to point back to the Alistair Vallejo and the countless times we saw that last year and the year before that, where we felt, oh man, we feel pretty good going into this decision, and it just didn't go the way that you wanted. And so, again, I'm not raining on anybody's parade. I'm not trying to tell anybody that, hey, I've heard different than what's been said out there. I've heard the same things that everybody else has heard. But you know what? I heard that last year, and I heard it the year before, and I've heard it countless times. It doesn't matter until it comes to crunch time. And last week, Jamie, I said something that I think that people don't really get, and that is when you're recruiting, you don't negative recruit until the very end. And the reason why is you don't want to negative recruit a team because it looks bad on you if you're constantly talking negative about one of your competitors all the time. You don't do that. And Notre Dame doesn't do that. But when you do it is during decision time. And the reason why is you want to do it at the very end because what you're trying to do is create just that little bit of doubt, that, hey, something may not be as good as I thought it was. I never thought about that. Those types of things. And this is where the bombs start to get dropped. And you want to do it at the very end. And so expect teams to very negatively recruit Notre Dame. And they have their ammunition, same ammunition it's always been. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Some would argue that in the Alistair Vallejo situation, I think it did work in certain situations. So this stuff does matter, and you don't do it until the very end. And at the very end, that's when you start dropping the bombs because you want to create that little bit of doubt. If somebody's thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go here," and then you say, "Oh, but what about this? Did you hear about this?" That's when the negative recruiting really starts, and that's where all this can become confusing. And that's where a lot of times people are like, oh, he's going back and forth. Oh, I thought it was this, and it's not. It's something else. And that's when all this starts to happen. And again, this is where, 25 years of experience in following recruiting, I've kind of learned these types of things throughout the years. I didn't know that 5 years into recruiting. I didn't know that 10 years that it was as big a deal as it actually is. So anyway, your thoughts on this before we start talking about each guy?
Well, I think that, what you're saying about, how things change and obviously the negative recruiting and them getting in the ear, like, I think we see that all the time. Obviously, Nick Singleton is a perfect example of like, there was the high off of that where everyone was thinking Notre Dame was there. And then boom, it just like flipped like that in a second. And all of a sudden it was Penn State. I will say the thing with Vallejo, I think right away, the one thing that makes his thing different than any of the visits or any of the feedback, I think that was the feedback going into the visit. The feedback after the visit, that wasn't really,
no,
it wasn't the kind of thing that you wanted to hear.
No,
there's no way Notre Dame wasn't getting good vibes off of it. Matt and Christian, did not get good vibes from the kid off of it. Like there wasn't that, the whole idea of his mom, being like, oh, I don't know about school with Notre Dame. I was like, well, that's not good. Like he doesn't, that usually means that, hey, they were negative recruited before and they bought into it. because usually that's the kind of thing that doesn't work against a parent, but apparently they don't value school as much, so whatever. But I think there's so much of it to where I'm going to take it back to something that you always say, Mike, and I think this is probably the thing that people forget so much is after a visit, everybody's saying all these great things, and that's great. Obviously, sometimes you don't get that vibe, but most of the time, it's very, very positive. But it's about what they do from now on. So it's one of these things where if all of a sudden we hear, because we just saw it with got other Notre Dame targets, if guys are canceling visits to other places, that's a good thing. That's
Very
obviously
good thing.
a very
Yes.
good thing for Notre Dame. So it's a different thing with Joey O'Brien. His visits are done, but with like Corey Adams, if he goes to Oregon, it doesn't mean that Notre Dame's out of it, but it's a really good thing if he cancels that Oregon visit for Notre Dame, right? And and same thing with Frizzle with Iowa, right? Like
Yes.
if he cancels that visit, like that's just one of those things that it's going to be a good thing, right? So I think you want to see what these guys do. You want to know where things are going. A lot of these, for the ones of the last visit, obviously you don't get that. But we're going to have a pretty good idea over the next little bit. And I think that for the guys that always kind of wanted Notre Dame or were really looking at that, or they really have the parents in their corner or whatnot, I think time in between this, usually you say, oh, well, if you want to come off the high of the visit and then the commit right away. I think a lot of times with Notre Dame, even like longer times, even though a lot of fans would want them to choose right away, like right after the visit, I think distance from that visit, like if guys are going to go say mid-July and just make a decision, I think that's usually a good thing for Notre Dame because a lot of the things that Notre Dame is, those are the things that don't wear off after a visit. It's not the recruiting pictures and you're wearing the championship belt and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's cool. All that stuff, all that hype stuff, you got to do it.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
Notre Dame wins. Notre Dame wins because, hey, I want to play for this head coach, or I want this education to go along with it too, or pick your poison, whatever you want to do there. But I think that usually is a good thing. So I think we'll kind of see as it goes along here. But certainly, I think this was a super critical weekend for Notre Dame recruiting. And the fact that we didn't get any of those Anderson Vallejo, or Alcer Vallejo type of
Vibes.
reactions from people,
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Well, I think with Vallejo too, I think what kind of hurt him too, and a lot of people will say, well, why would a parent do that? But look, if I'm Michigan, what I say in that situation is, I know they say that they graduate 100% of their players, and that's true. But what about this alleged situation with Gabe Rubio? Why was he missing a whole semester and could not play football for an entire year? I guarantee you that's probably what was said. You know what I mean? These are the types of things that happen, and that's what it is. And it's interesting because I just got off the phone before the show. I was talking to a guy who was very heavily involved in recruiting and very heavily involved in. I don't want to get into who or what, but it was interesting. We were talking about the negative recruiting and things that happen, and look, it's as simple as this. You go to a guy like, say, Ely, since Ely's not going to visit here, and you say, okay, you're from Hawaii, right? Are you really going to want to get up at 6 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, go start your car, go drive to campus, because you don't want to stay on their stupid campus, go drive to campus, go work out. After you work out, you're going to have to go trudge through 4 feet of snow to go to class, and then you're going to have to do that 6 or 4 times during the day, trudge through more 4 feet of snow to get back and go practice and blah, 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 when you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that here. These are the kind of things that happen now. These are the kind of things that are dropped as negatives, and these are the kind of things that Notre Dame has to battle. It's the same thing. It's happened every year. It's happened. Everybody knows what's going to happen, and you don't want to bring it up, but you also don't want to run away from it. So I think it's one of these things where you have to have a good response for these, and sometimes sometimes I almost think it's better to head it off at the pass and say, teams are going to say this about us, but here's why that's not a factor. And so it just is one of these things where, and I see Michael Park says, well, it doesn't snow in Michigan? Well, no, it doesn't snow. Of course it snows in Michigan. But do they actually go to class? No. So he's not walking through 4 feet of snow. He's not walking through 4 feet of snow through to 4 different classes because he's in the football building and he's taking online classes. That's what it matters. That's the situation. And I know people don't think that matters, but it does. It absolutely matters to some of these kids. To some of these
kids. To some kids.
To some of these kids, they choose hard, and that's what you're hoping for, and that's what you're dealing with.
Yeah. But the slogan wouldn't be "choose hard" if
exactly because it wasn't. Exactly. So these are the things that we all have to do, and it just is what it is, and this is what we have to deal with. And I think hopefully they can overcome it. I think that they will for a lot of these kids. I hope so, and I'm excited about it. So let's get into the players themselves. Kadon Finley came and visited. Hear very good things about it. First of all, Jamie, I don't know if you saw the video of them kind of running out of the tunnel and stuff. There's some video of them running out of the tunnel. They do this thing where they, act like it's game day and they run out of the tunnel. But man, that kid's put together. I like seeing that. He's way more put together than Jane Greathouse was coming in. I mean, he's a thick kid. I was very, very impressed with what I saw physically with him. His lower body's thick. I really hope they get this kid because I think he can be a really talented player. Goes to Texas this week and plans to announce July 4th. That's the situation. So I doubt Notre Dame's going to be able to tell him, please don't go to Texas. He's going to go to Texas. Of course he is. Can you weather the storm? And I'll say this right now. I have a feeling the kid has a pretty good idea where he wants to go. Now, whether that's Notre Dame or Texas, I think he has a really good understanding of where that is. If it's Notre Dame, it's going to be, can Notre Dame weather the storm? And a lot of times, I'll give you an example. I think Javian Osborne went up to Michigan knowing fully well he was going to Notre Dame, went up to Michigan, and Michigan, there was nothing they could do to change that. And I think that Javian Osborne told Notre Dame there's nothing they can do to change that, and nothing did change that. So what we have to hope is that the kid has a pretty good mind set right now as far as what he wants to do. And I think somebody in that situation, let's just say, let's assume, and we're assuming, let's assume that he does think that he wants to go to Notre Dame. I think for a kid that has already made his decision to go against his father's alma mater and all the pressure that comes with it, I think if he's made up his mind, I don't know if Texas can overcome that. I really don't. Because I think it's a hard decision to even come to that decision. So if that's the case, I feel pretty good about it. Even if, Texas they're going to throw money. Notre Dame's going to throw money. They're going to say this. Notre Dame's going to say that. We have to hope that Notre Dame is what he's decided on at this point, and that's where he feels like he's going. Because I think if he is, I'm not sure Texas can overcome that. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for them because the relationship has been so much longer with Notre Dame in terms of them making him a priority. He's been a priority for Notre Dame for a long time, and I understand, that flipped with Cohen Brown. They made him a priority, and then he accepted it. But that's not the same situation with Finley, where Finley has been very entrenched as Notre Dame telling him, you are our guy for the longest time. Yes. Well over a year, right? So it's been a couple years, and they've made him a priority this whole time. He's been to Notre Dame so many times. Um, so I think that's what it's ultimately going to come down to. And then also to like, there might be, we don't know whether or not, the being close to home or anything like that, whether or not that plays a factor into any of it. But he seems like pretty comfortable at Notre Dame. And I think it's one of these things that I wonder how some of these kids approach it, especially the receivers, because so many of these guys are so confident in their abilities, and they should be. But for him to, if you're at Notre Dame and you are the guy, he's going to come in and probably play very early at Notre Dame and be someone that has a chance to play and like be a multi-year starter and all of that. And at Texas, it's that room he's going to walk into is going to be a much different wide receiver room. Because they have landed a bunch of other like 5-star, like top 50,
Yes.
top 100 kids. So I wonder how that is going to play into it with it. Like, I don't know. I think there's a difference too, but with some guys when it's like a Jerome Bettis Jr. or a Bryce Young, and obviously those were guys that Notre Dame recruited hard and made priorities and all that kind of stuff. But their dads, they were guys who were kind of with Notre Dame for like, you just kind of figured it was going to happen because of that relationship. And when you're not kind of viewed as that, kind of like how Thomas Davis was kind of
Yeah.
like the last minute, all of a sudden, hey, we offered you now. I do wonder like how like the feelings you feel about that. And hey, sometimes the girl says, hey, well, I'd love to take you to prom now. And then they're like, yeah, sure, I've been waiting. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But I almost feel like that kind of would have happened already. I
Yeah.
think we would have seen that because he's been to Texas since that has happened. And it wasn't like a Cohen Brown thing. So I do think that Notre Dame is, if he is set there, then I do think that Notre Dame, I mean, right now things can flip, but I do feel like they're in a good position right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Look, your information is only as good as what you gather, and so, you know, and it's what everybody's read is on the situation. The kid isn't going to tell you. He isn't going to tell you. The parents aren't going to necessarily tell you either. So it's just about what is everybody's read on the situation. And for him, I think Notre Dame can point back and say, you were one of the very first guys we offered, and we would have taken you then, and we would have taken you the entire time. And I think that's been what they've been trying to sell the entire time. And as you mentioned, there's a good opportunity for that kid to play real early for Notre Dame, where it's probably not going to be the situation at Texas. And I'm sure they're hammering that home as well. All right, Devin Fitzgerald, he's already visited UCLA, Clemson, Stanford. Went to Notre Dame this week. Supposed to visit North Carolina next week. I think most people felt Stanford and Clemson were probably the top two going in this week, along with Notre Dame. Plans to announce July 5th. So still some cards to be played here, and there will be a lot of cards to be played, as really the next 15, 16 days to go by, for teams to try and do this. It'll be interesting to see if he takes the North Carolina visit. Does he need to? Don't know. A lot of people felt it would be, Stanford, Notre Dame. Some people felt Clemson was still very much in the race. I got to figure that this is, I got to figure Notre Dame's in a good situation with him too. And they're probably in the same situation that Texas is in that, with Kadon
They were
Finley, and that
late.
Notre Dame was late. But so was Clemson. And so I think the other one is Stanford has been around longer, and they have a valid thing. But, with Stanford, is that, are they going to play big time football? And I think, this kid probably wants to prove that he can play big time football. So I like where Notre Dame's at with him. Your thoughts here?
I think obviously if they would have offered him months and months ago, they would have already had him. I think that's probably
Yeah,
where it's at. And
sure.
Now it's just going through that and him kind of weighing it. But I kind of go back to what I said before, Mike, where I think having that time after the fact to kind of look at like him and his family and everyone who's making the decision to look at like the bigger picture of everything, I do think that leans towards Notre Dame for him.
I think Notre Dame plans to take four. I think that's kind of what they want to do is take four wide receivers. They have two committed, so then it becomes a situation of where are you at? Because you have Kadon Finley, you're going to wait for him no matter what. You have Devin Fitzgerald, but then you also had Braden Robinson visit this weekend. He's visited Arizona, Miami. A lot of people feel Notre Dame is the top team. Miami, in there as well. But how do you handle this? Because there's also on campus right now, you're also looking at a situation where you have Jaden Warren on campus as well. Another kind of fast guy, maybe a little bit bigger than Braden Robinson, kind of, could potentially play field, could play slot, kind of a similar player. So, do you push hard for Braden Robinson? And especially if there's only two spots for four guys, Brian Williams is supposed to visit this weekend, but I don't think that's going to happen. So really you're down to two spots for four guys. If you're Notre Dame, what do you do with Braden Robinson? Do you push hard? Do you want him?
I wouldn't push hard for him. And I kind of talked about this with Greg on Hidden Hustle on Thursday. I just don't think that. I think there is like some redundancy with him and Bubba Frazier. I also think just the size component of like what Notre Dame needs is obviously anyone could use his speed, but they need the size much more. They need the size. But there's a reason why you would have Fitzgerald and Finley, obviously,
yeah.
like way above him is because of that, right? And I mean, frankly, I think Brian Williams, if he was still someone that they wanted, like I would, if I was choosing between the two, I would say Williams, if you could only have one of them and you needed a fourth guy, I think that's the way that I would look at it. There's value with Robinson. He can be an explosive player, obviously with his return ability as well. I just think there's some things there because of his size. He is very small. Like he is very small. And that's something that I don't know if when you're coming down to it and you're looking at who you really, really want and who you really, really need, he'd be the lowest guy on the list for me out of the guys left. Well, I'd have him over Jaden Warren, but even though Warren is bigger, but yeah,
I would too, based off of film. But what we don't know, it's interesting because like you hear the Jaden Warren numbers, and you're like, wow, the track numbers are impressive. And here's the thing that's different about it versus other things with Warren. He ran nose back to back to back. So those are three different times that are legit. You know what I mean? And so one guy might have a great day, but when you run three kind of back to back to back, that means you really are that fast. It doesn't show up on the football field, though, to me. I don't see it as much on the football field. But certain guys just get faster. So you may be just like missing out. You know what I mean? But I will say this. I think Braden Robinson's a good football player. I think he's got good hands. I think he's very good in space. So I would not be opposed to him by any stretch of the imagination. Matter of fact, I would love to get Finley Fitzgerald and Braden Robinson if you have the room for him, because I do think Braden Robinson you can do some things with, and he's a good football player. He has really good hands, and he's very good in space, and he has that kind of quickness that I don't think even anybody on Notre Dame's roster really kind of has. I think Bubba Frazier could have that, certainly, and I think he's a bigger player, but he just has something that I kind of like, but he is small, so I totally understand the situation. All right. Preston Freisel visit went extremely well, according to everything. I think Notre Dame's in the driver's seat. Here's the situation, though. Supposed to be at Iowa this weekend. Probably the other contender at this point is Iowa, I think. But then you have Ian Premer, and his visit starts today, and he'll be gone by Wednesday. Will Notre Dame take 3? And look, I like Freisel, man. I really do. Would I take him over Ian Premer? I don't know, but I also know I would not risk letting Freisel go to Iowa, waiting on what Ian Premer does. Like, if I'm Notre Dame, I asked Ian Premer flat out on Wednesday, either you're in or you're out. Because if you're not in, we're taking those 2 guys and goodbye. You do not risk. I think Freisel's a good player, and I understand people like Premer more. He's taller, he's bigger. I get it. I think Freisel is going to be a really good player. And I think he may even be better than Premer when it's all said and done. It would not surprise me. I just think he's a really good football player and a very, very athletic one. A different type of tight end than they have right now. I think there's so many things you can do with him. And Jamie, I think he's a guy you could line up outside. I really do. I think he's a guy that if you miss on your big targets, you don't get the guys. He's a guy that you could do some things with outside. I would not, absolutely not pass on Preston Freisel. Your thoughts?
No way would I pass on him. I think he's a stud. I think he's
I do too.
really, really good. Yeah, he needs to physically develop, but he's already added a lot of weight from what you're seeing here, right? Like, he's 220 pounds right now. He's going to get quite a bit bigger. And he's just a really good athlete with great ball skills. Like, how many tight ends just run like this? Yeah. There's not many, right? And which is why when I said you look at him after the catch, and it's very similar to an Eifert. Like, that is kind of what you're doing, who was a big receiver and a guy who played safety and all that in high school. I think he's massively underrated. If you look at where he's rated now, it's basically the same, like where Eli Reardon was at this point. So he is, and obviously Reardon blew up and became like a top 100 kid by the end of it. I think this guy could be a top 100 kid. And I do like Premer a little bit more now, but I do think the ceilings, just like you said, I completely agree with you, Mike. I think the ceiling is like very similar. Like, both these guys could develop into just big time players. And I would never turn down this kid.
No, I would never either. I would, no matter what, I want that kid in the class. I mean, I think he's that talented. Evan Jacobson, another kid, supposed to take a tight end, came visited. I think everybody feels Notre Dame, in great shape with him. I like his body, big physical body. Gonna take a visit to Iowa State midweek. Been to A&M. Most feel Notre Dame's in the driver's seat. Will Iowa State be much of a thing? I don't know. I think you let him take the visit if he really wants to take the visit, because I don't think Iowa State will be a battle in the end. And it also gives you an opportunity in case, he does like it, and you have Premer or something like that. You could end up with Premer and Freisel, which I think would be fantastic. That would be very, very good. I would not pass on Jacobson either, because I think he's a different type of body and can do some things that the others can't. But your thoughts here on him? I do think he's a different tight end than the other two, and why he's wanted. Your thoughts?
He's definitely different. He's the more inline guy, which is why I think you want to have him in the class, because you'd like to pair one of those guys, like Premer or Freisel, with a Jacobson. I think that's kind of perfect for what Notre Dame would want. But I mean, he definitely has some receiving skills too. He's just not as dynamic as the other two. And like you said, like his size, I think he's going to be a monster. I think he's going to, really, really blow up and be a monster.
I think he'll be 280 in the end, don't you?
Yeah, or 270. I think.
Yeah. I think so. He's thick already. He's tall. I think, and he's all a 6'6", I think. So I mean, what? Maybe not 280, but certainly 270. I see that. And anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think that, I mean, when it comes down to it, I think Premer is a guy that you would take 3 tight ends for if they said, okay, if you already got the other two, and Premer was like, "Oh, I'm gonna wait." To me, that is a kid that you do maybe make an exception for. And they only took one last time. Obviously, they don't want to overdo it with the tight end, uh, like just numbers. But I just think if it's that guy, then that is an extra guy that you would save a spot for. Um, and I really don't know because I don't know what I have. Do you know when Premer is going to decide? Has he said when he has a date?
He's supposed to decide shortly after these visits, and so, but I don't think he has set a actual date or anything. But supposed to be sometime shortly after these visits. So, I
It
would
does
guess.
feel it does feel like we'll have a really good idea by like Wednesday
I
whether
guarantee you, Notre Dame's going to say, "Look, we need to know, because we
yeah.
have two guys that we will take right now." So, my guess is that's going to be the situation, and then I think the third option opens if you don't get 5 wide receivers, or you don't get all the defensive backs that you're looking for, right? Or maybe you don't get the offensive lineman you're looking for, right? So I think if something like that falls apart, then that third option at tight end is a possibility. But I think you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul either. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure that you hit your other numbers as well. And let's be honest, I think Notre Dame's in some very good tight ends for 2027. And literally all of them, all the guys they want came on campus here. Pretty much every single guy has been on campus and shown really strong interest. And so, and I think that some of them are more the Frizel fold, where they're not quite as thick, but they're also young. So I think that they'll gain some weight. But these guys are some really good athletes, and so you don't want to miss out on some 2027 guys by taking 3 guys at tight end if you don't really need 3. All right, Grayson. Christian says McHugh. I've been saying McHugh. I don't know exactly which one it is, so maybe it's McHugh. Uh, I think it comes down to Penn State, Notre Dame. It's interesting. You see a picture of him standing next to Marcus Freeman, who's at least 6'1", and he's definitely at least 5 inches taller than him. So he's a legit 6'6", Jamie. I love this kid, man. I just think he is such an important player in this class. I don't know whether they're going to get him. I think that the pull to Penn State and being close to home is going to be tough to overcome. But I also think that Notre Dame has a camaraderie there, an offensive line that I think he is attracted to. But you look at his physique there. I mean, this is a kid that's going to get a lot bigger and has the room to get a lot bigger. I love this kid, man. I hope they get him, Jamie. He's supposed to decide July 1st is when he plans to make his announcement, and he's supposed to go to Texas this weekend. If he cancels Texas, I think that's a good thing for Notre Dame, because that's one less option. But I really do think it's going to come down to Penn State, Notre Dame. And I mean, I don't care what people say. Penn State does a good job with their offensive line. They have. So I understand why kids are interested in Penn State. And if you're a Penn State or fan, or you grew up in that area, it's hard to turn that down. But you just have to hope Notre Dame did enough with him. And I think it's going to be a difficult decision. This one's going to come down to crunch time. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, I think. July 1st. What do you like about his game?
Well, I think one, he's a true tackle, and I think they do need a true tackle, because I think Patrick can play tackle, Gregory Patrick, but I think he is someone who might play multiple positions. So if I have a feeling he'll start out at tackle, but also if you land a McHugh, maybe then you say, well, it's not as important for Patrick to start out as tackle, or you think of it in those terms, because the other guys I view as interior guys. And I know they took 3 tackles in the last class, and they like them all, right? I think all can be pretty good. I mean, especially Black and Augustine. I'm very high in those guys. But I think McHugh is one of these guys who, obviously, physically, he is going to get quite a bit bigger and add a lot of weight. I think he's got nasty to his game. I think he's a very good athlete, a really, really good athlete. And he has all the traits that you kind of look for in a guy who can play left tackle for many years, right? So I'm a big fan of his game. I think he's one of these guys who is going to go way up when it comes to his rating as time goes on too. So um, I think he's a pretty important guy to me. Like I know that they don't, Ugboko is the other guy that they're still kind of after, and we'll see kind of what happens with that. I know that he was predicted by I think Steve Wiltfong predicted him to go to Georgia. His brother wants to Georgia. It goes to Georgia. So we'll see what happens there. If he even takes a visit, who knows, right? Like you never know with this kind of stuff. But McHugh, I think is one of those guys that you would just you don't wait for Ugboko to figure out what's going on. You take him. He's a very very good prospect.
Love him. I think his athleticism is better than Augustine. I really do. I think his athleticism is on par with Black. I really think that he's that kind of an athlete, and you take a guy like that. Of course, you take a guy like that. I love the guy. I think he's going to be a really talented player, really good player when it's all said and done. All right, dude. We got the two defensive backs that everybody wants to know about: Kari Adams, Joey O'Brien. Kari Adams, been to Penn State, South Carolina, and Michigan. Supposed to go to Oregon next week. There's been some thoughts that he may not make that visit. Will he make that visit? Don't know. Many feel it's a Notre Dame Penn State battle, but some people feel like Oregon's very much in the race too. Man, I love this kid. I love this kid, man. I loved all the corners they got last year. I think this guy's got huge upside. And, this is a kid built like Leonard Moore. He just is. He's built like Leonard Moore. Long, very, very long, good athlete. I just love this kid. I hope that they can get him. And he plans to make a decision shortly after his officials. So, won't probably happen this week, but should be shortly after. We'll see. Maybe it will happen this week. We don't know. Will he take that Oregon visit? But I love this kid, man. I just hope they get him, Jamie. I really do. Thoughts here?
I mean, like you kind of said to back at the beginning, everybody overreacts to what is said right after the visit and all that. But the vibes are obviously very good right now for Notre Dame. That would be very significant if he doesn't go on the Oregon trip. He is, to me, an absolute elite corner in this class, and someone who has the ability to be a very, very high pick. Like he has one of those. I think he's on par with Dallas Golden as an athlete, and I would say he's probably even a little bit better. I mean, he's definitely better as a corner than him. Similar as a two-way kind of stud. O'Brien is obviously a two-way stud too, but I think Kari Adams, to me, if you were going to say who is the most important guy out of this whole thing, you'd probably say that Finley, just because of the need at receiver. But I personally would put Adams even a little bit ahead of O'Brien, even though I love O'Brien as a prospect, just because his ability to play corner at that position, where I think O'Brien is going to play safety. Obviously, he might play corner too, but Adams, I think, has just the sky's the limit for this kid. I think he's an absolute stud.
What you want is both of them, right? Because if
Yes.
you get both of them, then you have the ability to do whatever you need to with Joey O'Brien, right? You can do anything with Joey O'Brien, and you can give him the kind of, especially if you know that Kari Adams is in, then you can say to Joey, "Hey, you want to play offense, and you think that offense is the best thing for you. In the end, we'll start you there and see, right? If you think defense is the best thing for you, and you still want to play offense." We already have Kari Adams, so we don't need you to play every single down. We already have, Dallas Gold and who was the other
Mark
guy? Zachary. We also got Zachary, and we got guys, so you can play some of these other positions where you don't have to play every other down or every down. So love him. I just really hope they get him. And then of course, I think the most important thing, Jamie, is you wanted to hear really good vibes coming out of this weekend, and we did hear that, right? We did hear that. That's so important. Joey O'Brien, some feel it's actually Notre Dame and Oregon instead of Notre Dame Penn State, which a lot of people thought it is. That would be interesting to see if that's the case. He's going to make a decision. I think it's on Friday. Is that right? I think it's the 20th,
Yeah.
where he's making his decision. Oh boy, this is going to be this is just a type of player that you have to land. He can do so many things for you. He's from a great program. There's just so much that you got to like about this kid, and I just really hope you can land him. And Kari, you want to start landing kids from that program as well. They haven't had a lot of success from his program. They landed a few kids, but just haven't had a lot of guys that have turned into great players at Notre Dame. And there's a ton of kids come from that school. So you definitely want to do that. With Joey O'Brien, I got to figure he knows where he's going. You know what I mean? I got to figure he knows where he's going. The vibes are, of course, everybody feels very, very good about it coming out of this. But here's one thing I know about Joey O'Brien based off everything that I've heard. He doesn't tell anybody. So I'm not sure where the vibes are coming from. You know what I mean? He's a very savvy kid, and Kari Adams very much the same way, to where they're not somebody who leans really hard or heavy and says things. And I don't think that either one of them are going to say, oh yeah, I'm absolutely coming here. So that's what gives me a little bit of pause about getting really excited about it, just based off of and the other thing with O'Brien is it seems like everywhere he's gone, there's been very positive vibes after it, right? Clemson thought, oh man, we made a big move. We have a real great shot. Penn State, same thing. A lot of people thought, oh man, will he even visit anywhere else after this? So, but I love the fact Notre Dame got the last visit. I think that Notre Dame has been on his mind for a long time. And with him and Kari, I think it comes down to, do I want to choose hard? And what I think is going to help Notre Dame's situation is, I think Notre Dame's defensive backs group is very, very tight, and I think that that's going to help Notre Dame. And then I hate to say it, I have a feeling that this is going to be a Marcus Freeman thing. If they land him, they like Marcus Freeman, and they want to play for that type of a coach. And gosh, you just got to hope that this happens, man. If they could land these two together, Jamie, with the class they got last year, oh man, there's never been that kind of recruiting at Notre Dame at defensive back. Never, not even close. If they could land those two, and let me be frank in saying that Matt Freeman could not be higher on Pouncey. It just could not be higher on Pouncey. Just loves everything about him, especially seeing him physically. And by the way, Chasten Smith's a darn good player. You know what I mean? So they're in a very good situation if they could land all those guys. And I would be so thrilled if that were to happen. All right. Nick Reddish, go ahead. You want to add anything, Jamie?
Well, I just want to say that with O'Brien, Adams, Finley, we can even add, but like obviously those guys help make Notre Dame better, and that's important. But if they don't pick Notre Dame, they're playing against them. Like those are the guys that you are going to play and have to beat to win a national championship, right? So that's what also makes them very critical players to land.
Absolutely. And these are the types of guys you're going to play against. All right, Nick Reddish, been to Indiana, Virginia Tech, Wisconsin. Many feel it's a Notre Dame Virginia Tech battle. He has the two brothers of Virginia Tech, and that's always the tough thing. He's not deciding till July 11th, so lots of cards to be played here. I wish it were sooner because he just came off that. And I'll tell you why. As a parent, of course, you want your kid to go to Notre Dame. You want to do this. But also as a parent, your life is a whole lot easier if all of them are at the same school. They're all
at the same spot, yeah.
You know what I mean? It just is. So that's why I really wish the decision was quick right after the visit. And as a parent, you want to do what's best for your kid, and you want to let them make that decision. And I'm sure that their parents are going to do that. But at the same time, if I'm Virginia Tech, I feel good that it's going to be until July 11th. That's a lot of time to kind of lean on mom and dad. And so I love the kid. I think he's a really talented player. Notre Dame likes him a lot. And I know he doesn't have the offers of a Joey O'Brien or a Kari Adams, but they do really like this kid. I know why. I think he's a good player. I really do. A very physical player, very smart, instinctual player. When you watch his film, he makes plays that instinctual players play. Like Ivan Taylor that went to Michigan that we were so high on. Ivan Taylor made those types of plays too. And this kid, is covering one guy and just feels where the ball is going and then goes off his guy and makes a pick, goes off his guy, makes a tackle. It just has a really good feel for the game. So I like this kid, but that's the only negative that I'm a little bit concerned about with that little part of it. But I do think Notre Dame was in a great spot. I think that they'll do everything they can. I could see it going either way. I really could see it going either way. If he decided today, I'd feel really good about it. But we'll have to see what happens. All right. Next week they have Brian Williams supposed to come. It'll be interesting. He went to Kentucky. Most feel Alabama's the team right now. He's also been to Penn State and Florida. If I'm Notre Dame, I still try and push for it. Unless I know I have Caden Finley locked in, or I have a third wide receiver I know is locked in, I still push to get Brian Williams to come. I really do. I think he's a good player. I just don't know whether he will. They have Elijah Golden, and he was at Alabama this weekend. They had Keon Keeley as his host, who obviously Irish fans know. I don't know. I think Jamie and I know something about that. I'm not sure that was a good idea when it's all said and done. I'm not sure that was a good idea that they had him host. Not that I think Keon Keeley would have said anything negative about Alabama by any means, but like I said, we have some knowledge there that I think could help Notre Dame in that situation. Dre Quinn is supposed to come. He's been to Georgia Tech. By the way, Elijah Golden has said he probably won't decide until August. It's going to be a while. So a lot of people think it's Bama Notre Dame for that. I do think that that's what's going to come down to, but we're going to have a really that's going to be a battle down to the end on that. And I still think Notre Dame's in good shape there. Dre Quinn, been to Georgia Tech, been to Clemson, been to Georgia, went to Texas this weekend. Texas seems to think that they lead. If I'm Notre Dame, I know that a lot of people are like, well, it's just, Elijah Golden or nobody. Man, I still go after this kid. I think he's a good player. I still go after this kid. I try and get him to visit. And Ekene Bogo, he's been to Florida, Clemson, Georgia. He's supposed to visit this weekend. A lot of people think that may be canceled. If I'm Notre Dame, I still work on that one too. I still try and bring him. I really do. I think he's a good player. And you don't know what's going to happen with McHugh. I think it's important to continue to get kids from North Carolina. Notre Dame's had a lot of success with that, with kids from North Carolina. I think you want to continue to try and do that. And then, of course, there's Donovan Webb, who's been to Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, and Michigan already. He's supposed to come next weekend. Those are kind of the guys that are left on the board. Clearly, Elijah Golden is probably the most likely at this point. If you're Notre Dame, what do you do with these guys? Do you push? Do you still try and push for these guys to visit?
I think so, because of where they're at in terms of how many people are visiting. There's not that many people visiting this weekend, so I don't think it is a waste of time to have like one or two extra guys there that were already planned on being there. I don't think that's taking away attention from anyone. I think it comes down to exactly the same thing with like O'Brien and Adams and Finley and these guys. If they're not going to Notre Dame, they're going to those other programs. And fine, if they say, or someone from their camp says, yeah, we're not going to Notre Dame, then yeah, of course you wouldn't want them to come. But I just really think that those level of players, as long as they say they're still open at that point, what's the harm in just taking a shot with them? Unless you think that they are going to be someone that they didn't have a good time before, or you really don't think that they have much interest at all. Like, I totally get the thing with Ely. I mean, he was decided. Like, that wasn't something you're going to bring him in midweek by himself, and
Yeah.
he's pretty much it's signed, sealed, delivered already. Like, yeah, no point in that. But I think with these guys, there's still chance, and even if it's one of these things where something opens up later on, and you still have like kind of established that relationship where hey, maybe if something happens down the line, that might be something you go back and revisit. If they decide to decommit, there's some kind of thing going on with the coaching staff or whatever. I think it's a good idea to do it. I just wanted to single out Webb because he's a guy that obviously nobody's talking about. I think he's a really good prospect. I think he's very
I do
similar to
too.
Reddish too, where he's like he's a playmaker, super instinctual. Um,
Yep.
I like him quite a bit. So I think that's a guy that obviously was a later offer, was a guy a little bit under the radar. But he's a really, really good prospect.
I
Yeah, and
agree
it,
too.
Michael, yeah, sorry, but I was just going to want to say Michael Parks. Yeah, Ivan Taylor did go to Alabama. He went to Michigan and then flipped to Bama later. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so
No, I
sorry.
do think that's a good point. I do like Donovan Webb, and if they don't get Reddish, I don't think that getting Webb would be like a huge loss or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination. All right, well, we do have some questions here, and I guess we'll see what happens. Well, let's just get to some of these. We hear often that big time wide receiver recruits don't want to come to a place that hasn't produced big time wide receivers recently. This makes sense. But then how do you break the cycle if you aren't going to get big time recruits? You have to hope the current wide receivers play like 5-star guys. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it is. What you have to do is you have to find guys that have a high upside and then develop them. Um, you look at the situation with say cornerback, right? A lot of the guys like uh, um, when you look at the guys that Mike Mickens has developed over the years, a lot of those guys were not big time high 4-star guys. They were guys that low 4-star, a lot of times 3-star players that he identified physically that could play, and he's developed them. And because he's had that success, now all of a sudden you're starting to get these corners, these top corners, very interested in Notre Dame, and that's very, very important for Notre Dame. So what you have to do is get a guy like a Jaden Greathouse, develop him into a player that lower 4-star player, but then all of a sudden becomes a second-round pick and continues to dominate in college football and make big plays. You develop players like that, they start to notice. And that's really what needs to happen for Notre Dame to kind of get over the hump, and hopefully they'll do it. All right, if it gets slow this summer, there any chance to get some of the Power Hour greats on? Tony from the bunker or Tom from LA? It'd be fun to hear from Buccos if possible. Yeah, it's interesting. There's I've actually been talking to I had a couple ideas on that. So there's a couple things that I have, a couple irons in the fire for July that we may bring on here and have some fun with. And so, yeah, I think it's a good idea. All right.
I did enjoy Tony back in the day. I have to
Oh,
say,
yeah.
even though you
Yeah.
had some battles with the mic, but I did enjoy the always. You know who this is.
Yeah.
I enjoyed
We
it.
always enjoy that. And I enjoyed Tony too.
Yeah.
He was quite the character. All right. With all the changing going on between portal, NIL, roster size, and Freeman's approach to things, how do you see recruiting changing going forward? Is there anything in the fans need to start getting used to seeing each recruiting cycle? I mean, if I were being honest about it, Jamie, and I try to be, I think that Notre Dame fans need to understand that there's just some 5-star guys that just aren't going to be interested in Notre Dame, right? There just is. And that's even if Notre Dame wins national championships. And it's because of the choose hard part of it. But I'm okay with that. I think that some 5-stars are a pain in the ass. I think some 5-stars are difficult to deal with. I think some 5-stars are guys that can be a cancer to your program. And the other thing that I think is important is I think Marcus Freeman understands this is you have to get guys that fit the program and fit the culture that you're trying to get. And so maybe sometimes you could get a 5-star that would be an instant impact guy, but he may not be the right fit for the culture of things. And so I think what Notre Dame is going to lean heavily into is let's try and find the Pounceys of the world that have the physical talent of it. They can run, they can do those types of things. Um, and then let's make them into superstars. And I think that you're going to see a lot of those types of players develop at Notre Dame. And I think you've already seen that happen at Notre Dame under this current coaching staff. Anything you want to add to that, Jamie?
Um, I guess in terms of, I mean, I think that is definitely a thing where they're going to focus in on guys. And it's always something that a new coach learns, that there are going to be guys that, even though the talent is so great, that just would never fit and just will never have the interest in Notre Dame. And I think we've seen them kind of like maybe have initial interest and then kind of shy away because they're like, well, this guy's not gonna, it's not gonna be a fit, right? So I think that that is something important. But just in terms of like what is gonna happen with the recruiting going forward and all of that, I think the portal is going to get less crazy. I think this was the thing is with the settlement and being like essentially like a hard cap on what teams are going to spend there. You're going to see a lot less guys just leaving because somebody offered them a huge bag somewhere else. I'm not to say that that still won't happen where there will be tampering and all that. Yeah, I think that's going to be part of it, but it won't be as prevalent, I'm going to guess. So there'll be less of that. You see, Notre Dame hasn't been affected by it, but a lot of other schools have. And I don't think that is going to be as big of a thing. And I really don't know what else is going to change. But there is going to be something different about them having the 105. And that's where you're going to see some teams where, Notre Dame says, oh, we're going to take 95, save for 10 walk-ons. And some schools are going to approach it a different way. But that is going to be something that shifts things with recruiting. And how could it not when you're going to have extra scholarships to play with?
Yeah. The other thing too, I think that is going to, I hate to say it, but with the, the HOA is running by here, doing their mowing. The other thing that I think you're going to see, unfortunately, with this settlement is I do think that the bag man is going to come out, and that's going to be a problem for a lot of things. That's just it. I don't see how you can solve that. And a lot of people keep asking, well, what the bag man, how does it work? I've mentioned this before, and this is the kind of stuff that happens, and people don't realize it, but it's the stuff that happens is they're like, well, how do you get away with it? Well, you show up at a casino, right? Some guy shows up at a casino, they cash in $100,000 worth of chips, and then they're playing their game, and then they meet somebody in the bathroom and they hand off $100,000 worth of chips. This is the kind of stuff. This is the way they get around it, and this is the way it's happened for years and years and years, and that's the kind of stuff that's going to continue to happen with this new settlement until they get something figured out. And we have to hope that that's what they do. All right. Well, my dog's barking. Well, I'll get through these last couple here because, again, this mowing stuff. Sorry, I apologize. Mike's prediction on Joey and Golden. I do think they'll get Golden. I'm less confident on Joey O'Brien. I know a lot of people are very positive on that. I hope that's the case, but I'd say that's 50-50. I'd say, if I had to guess on Golden, I'd say probably a 70-30 Notre Dame situation. But I think with Joey O'Brien, I'd say 50-50, and I have no idea which way it's going to go. We already talked about the the visits and all that type of thing. So and how they did and what all that means. Anything you want to add, Jamie, about this and because it is coming down to crunch time and we just got to hope that they can close. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, you got to hope that they're going to close here. I really think that, it's going to be interesting. I think with when you compare schools like Alabama versus Notre Dame for Elijah Golden, that's such a different dynamic where I can't even really remember the last time Notre Dame went up where it was like head to head versus Alabama. And obviously, this isn't Nick Saban's Alabama, so that makes it different, obviously. But it just doesn't happen that often. Where you would see it with like Georgia, some occasionally, because there was a kid from like a Georgia private school that Notre Dame was really in on too, but it just doesn't happen that much with Alabama. And I just think that Golden is going to be where it's kind of always been leaning, has been Notre Dame. And I think that because, the August part of it, like you said, Mike, that part's going to lead to Notre Dame in a good way.
I think so too, because I think he's the type of guy who is always kind of bought into what Notre Dame is. And I think he's a different kid. And you're not going to have to convince him to like Notre Dame. You know what I mean? I think he already likes what Notre Dame is, where I think some other kids you have to convince to like Notre Dame and accept what Notre Dame is. I think he's already accepted what Notre Dame is. And that's 90% of the battle, I think, sometimes. And then it just comes down to all the other stuff. So I that's why I feel more confident that they'll get him than, say, a Joey O'Brien, who, we'll see what happens. All right, folks, that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed that. We will be back next week, and hopefully we'll have some good news, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully there's a lot of good news, and excited to see how this all unfolds. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.